A few weeks back, one of the most unexpected projects in Nintendo Direct history was announced. They were completely remaking Super Mario RPG, a fan favorite with licensing issues that presumably locked it to the SNES for the rest of time. Now, does this classic that has charming graphics, great gameplay, and a fantastic localization need a remake? Not really, but at the end of the day, remakes are determined by popularity and money. Of course, companies are gonna pick the RPG you played as a child, and not Kururin, the Japanese exclusive hit where you play as a spinning platform. But what if only the most deserving games got remakes? What criteria would even be used, and which game is the most deserving of a second chance? Well, if it was up to me, I'd use 3 different metrics, starting with... As time marches forward and consoles get more powerful, you tend to notice just how much games of old were limited by their hardware. The most obvious of these limitations being graphics and audio. I think the worst aging era is the N64 and PS1 generation. Early 3D projects are defined by their heinous lack of polygons. Characters are these unmoving heads with textures plastered on to mimic a human face. Animating in 3D was a whole new technology at the time, and well, it's kinda obvious that it was. Not only do limited graphics just look worse, but it can make it hard to tell what every object actually is, and requires the player to use a lot of their imagination to fill in the gaps. When updating visuals for the modern era, you see huge jumps in readability, and many times a lot more life to previously barren areas. On the audio side of things, you have the birth of chiptune via arcade machines and 8-bit consoles. Limitations for so many iconic pieces of music to be composed with just a few channels of audio. Tracks like 1-1, Unbreakable Determination, and Punch-Out's fight theme are practically burned into my skull. But at the same time, a lot of these pieces are very loud. Strong melodies dominate the NES library, not really leaving room for more subtle flourishes. When moving to a full orchestra for remakes, it allows composers to use the whole volume scale. Those quiet moments hit so much harder when the funkiest groove you've ever heard is not backing them up. But hardware limitations can go a little bit deeper than that. Some games have been specifically designed for the system they were released on, and you see this a lot with Wii and DS-era titles. The Kirby Canvas Curse series has 2 games locked to pretty unique form factors. Both rely on either using the bottom screen of the DS or the Wii U gamepad to draw lines of paint. So unless there's another dual-screen device that gets released, they would both need huge gameplay overhauls to be seen again. By far, the best game to be neutered by its hardware, though, has got to be Kid Icarus Uprising. Ask any person who's beaten this game, and they'll say it's one of the best to ever do it. The characters are legitimately hilarious, with perfect voice actors bringing them to life. The story is fantastic, featuring decent twists that keep you on your toes, and the soundtrack goes stupid. There's just one problem. Nintendo decided to make a twin-stick shooter without a twin stick. So then, how exactly does it control, you may ask? Like this. It's not as uncomfortable as it looks, but this control scheme definitely excludes some groups, such as left-handed people. The very simple fix is to remake it for a platform like the Switch, which supports a right and left stick. That gives approximately 10% of the population a fair chance to experience the game without the huge workarounds built into the 3DS version. It also just makes it more comfortable for everyone. Now, of course, because this is the most logical solution, there's an absolute 0 chance Nintendo does this. Remakes are the second chances of gaming, and so fixing the gameplay is a top priority. Confusing layouts, bad cameras, or poorly thought out mechanics can be solved with a little guidance. You need to keep the core gameplay intact while adding necessary changes to make interacting with that core more fun. Mario 64 has a few issues due to being so experimental. I quite enjoy the original, it's got great movement with some rooms for glitches and tricks. However, shifting Sandland is like Satan raised his realm from the underworld. If you touch the pyramid with even the tip of Mario's Italian Goomba Stomper, you slide down the whole thing and die to the instant kill sand pit that is underneath a majority of the stars for some reason. The camera gets funky in some places, some guy has placed invisible walls all over Tall Mountain, Bowser has like a really big head. These are all small issues, but over the course of a single playthrough or even multiple, they start annoying you and drag down the experience. Notably, they're also unintentional. Fixing the collision or the design of some areas doesn't translate scramble over the original. It just allows you to interact with the fun part of the game more often. That's more of a minor change, but there are games that heavily benefit from major additions. If you've ever played the original Sonic 1 or any form of it, you'll recognize that something is definitely missing. Then, when you're trying to get out of a slope with no speed, you'll remember, oh, the spin dash doesn't exist yet. This makes the original kinda hard to get through. Every time you need to clear a loop, you gotta trudge back a few steps, then turn around to even have a chance of getting up. Adding the spin dash back in reveals that it was the missing piece to the gameplay. Not only does it bypass inconvenience, but it also enhances the physics-based platforming with new tricks. If you've ever played a game that's missing a piece, a remake is perfect for them. Nowadays, publishers understand that the gaming landscape is wider than just their country of origin. You know, you got the release of all versions of a game at the same time instead of staggered dates, and less games than ever remain country exclusives. It didn't always used to be that way though, and back in the 16-bit era, your favorite RPG was probably localized by a very talented team who absolutely fucked the original script. That's not a negative, by the way. There are tons of stories enhanced by their creatively driven localizations. Super Mario RPG is one of them, and is a big reason why I'm concerned for the upcoming remake. The original on SNES is a delightful roller coaster of jokes, changed for English audiences, yet still hysterical. The creative liberties taken fit the tone of the adventure perfectly. I mean, they gave the chef a German accent for literally no reason, and I love it. On the other side of this though, you have something like Chrono Trigger, the perfect RPG bringing together the efforts of every big name in the industry at the time. It's a beautiful story I'd love to take seriously, except Frog is talking like the King James Bible. Yes, he is from the medieval time period, but none of the other characters in this era talk with this accent, making this a conscious decision made by the localization team. It's jarring and hard to read, and legitimately takes me out of the experience when he says mayhap. This was something that was changed for the DS version of Chrono Trigger. Not only has the old been taken out of Frog, but also all of the characters have much tighter dialogue. In addition, item descriptions have become a lot more helpful. It's much more clear what everything does now. A remake is a chance to tell the story how it was originally intended, without the influences of other creatives. There's an overall increase in clarity, whether that be the themes of a character or how useful an item is. I will say, changing a script is a controversial choice, as some people will probably get mad at me for not liking the original translation of Chrono Trigger. And to those people I say, at least my frog doesn't say mayhaps, freak. These are the three major reasons for a remake in my opinion, and games stuck with these issues should be first up to bat. They all essentially get in the way of the game fulfilling its creative vision, whether the roadblock be the hardware, the gameplay, or the localization. So now you're wondering, out of all the potential candidates, which title is the most deserving of a remake? Well, for my money, I gotta give it to the Castlevania game that tried to fight the passage of time and just lost. That game is Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance. Harmony is essentially the biggest victim of circumstance I've ever seen. First thing you might notice is the strange outlines on our main character here. That's because these graphics were tailor-made for the Game Boy Advance. See, the GBA didn't have a backlit screen, meaning games were much harder to see without tons of light surrounding you. The previous Castlevania Circle of the Moon was criticized for its color palette being too hard to see on the screen. To correct for this, the sequel got blasted with a packet of Skittles, ensuring sprites were readable even in the dark. The only problem is that on modern technology, it looks, for lack of a better term, very bad. Second thing you might notice is the music is awfully compressed, even for the GBA. Well, because they use most of the handheld's processing power on the highlighted graphics, the Harmony team had to sacrifice the quality of the music and work in an 8-bit sound font. What's crazy is that there are still good songs in here. The piece you're listening to right now is Successor of Fate, a melancholic march into Dracula's castle, bringing in that signature dissonance from the title. Michiru Yamane composed a hydrogen bomb for the coughing baby known as the Game Boy Advance sound chip. It's insane. Unfortunately, many of the songs loop very quickly to keep audio storage low, and tons of the tracks remain violently unmemorable. Next, you got the gameplay. Juiced is one of the fastest Belmonts on the ground, sporting 2 dashes mapped to L and R. You can chain these together to blaze through rooms like you were the son of Dracula. Look at this slide. On the contrary, air movement feels terrible. Jumping kills your momentum instantly, interrupting the flow of traversal while moving through the castle. And if you try to jump and whip, Juiced jump arc becomes more committal than a 25-year marriage. You will run straight into the loving appendage of a peeping eye, high, as you cannot adjust yourself pretty much at all once you take off. It makes fighting any airborne enemy a nightmare, and it seems the developers knew this as well. Most of the bosses are restricted to the ground, with only very simple attack patterns, and the ones that aren't lead to the worst battles in the castle. Last, you got the script, which isn't bad until it is. For example, midway through the game, Maxim gives you his bracelet, which he says can let you into the Lord's Room. Okay, sure. Where would that be? I thought it would be this door, which looks completely different from all other entrances, but nope, that doesn't do anything. The actual location is at the peak of the map atop Sky Walkway. It's funny because the door blocking it has no distinguishing traits that would make you think that's where you need to progress. It only says, "This door is sealed with a magical spell," which is almost the same text as other doors in the castle, and also, why would the bracelet count as a magic spell? Clearly, this game has got issues, like a lot of them I didn't even mention. There are no warp points in the castle, meaning you gotta hike it everywhere. Equipable stone pickups have no visual indicators that they're active and aren't interesting. Juice animations are highly exaggerated, like bro is hitting his shit just from walking. If it has all these problems, why of all games would we dedicate resources to Harmony of Dissonance? Well, that's exactly why. Kid Icarus Uprising is still one of the most charming games I've ever touched with my right hand. Mario 64 is still a huge breakthrough in 3D platforming with or without shifting Sandland. Chrono Trigger is still a masterpiece whether or not Frog says mayhap. But Harmony of Dissonance? It's like the 8th best Metroidvania in the series that inspired the genre. A game with legitimately great ideas that weren't executed correctly the first time around. Buried under the avalanche of issues, there is a good game here. Dashing through corridors, stopping just to strike an enemy down with your whip is fun. The movement has these little quirks to it, like if you slide off a ledge, you get to keep some of your momentum. Mastering Juiced Belmont, spending as little time in the air as possible, is a skill you'll pick up over the course of the adventure. This is the core of the gameplay, and it can be salvaged. If Harmony was given a second chance, who knows what its completed creative vision could bring to the table. Perhaps its ideas could surpass those that inspired it, if not locked to the prison known as the GBA hardware. Now, will this remake ever happen? No,